Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes. This day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
If I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Well, hello everyone. How are you doing? As you can tell, I got my hair, and I don't have my anarchy necklace out. Need that. I got my hair freshly pinked for the occasion. Wayne did this for me last night. He did a good job. Look at that, huh? Okay. The moment of reckoning is nigh. It is indeed nigh. So, my hearing is on Sunday. I posted the login information for it on my Secretary in Exile page, also on my personal page, and in the Mises Caucus group. So, those of you who are interested, and I sure hope it's everyone who can attend, please do plan on being at the Judicial Committee hearing. There's multiple reasons for that. One of them is, I need your support. Second reason is, this is a very important proceeding of the party, and it's very important that those who have investment in this party be very aware of what happened and what's happening. Third, you'll probably find it interesting, something that, thank God, doesn't happen very often. In fact, I'm the only officer to have ever been successfully suspended so far. Well, actually, no. Lee writes, but he won his appeal. But was he an officer? Yeah, he was vice chair of the party, I think, at the time. So we'll see. This isn't a common occurrence. But his was more on a technicality. Oh, look at this. My phone. Let me Go stop my phone here a second. Oh, here we go. I don't know what that was, because I record with my phone. I will try to record it and post it to my YouTube, because I don't trust the party to do so. And yeah, so this isn't a common occurrence. And Lee Wright's suspension was more over a technicality. They said he didn't pay his membership dues, and you have to be a National Party member to be on the LNC, but somebody paid his dues for him. It wasn't any allegations of any bad behavior or anything like that. So there's been attempts before, but we're talking about successful ones that made it to at least the JC level. Before we get started tonight, I will, I think after this is posted, put up in the show cards here the video I did that explained how a judicial committee hearing works. But this is going to be dealing, this one right here, is going to be dealing specifically with my hearing. So far, and you guys can testify that I've been very good. I've hardly talked about it. And I certainly haven't talked about the specifics, except for to show where the LNC lied about me. Funny habit that they're getting into. So this today is going to be getting into the specifics. Why? Because if you just go to the hearing and are not familiar with the filings, you're going to be a bit lost, or at least not understand as much as you can. Now, anyone can write the JC tomorrow and get all the filings, but very few people have availed themselves of that. And I don't know how many have kept updated. Quite a few people, it seems like, got my petition, but I don't know how many people followed through and got the reply and all of the other supplemental filings. And I didn't publicize the filings. And there's a good reason, at least in my mind, for that. It's because I do not believe I don't believe the JC should be a political body. Is it a political body? Yeah. But I am not going to add to the politicization of the JC. But I have to balance that with the education of the members. So I wanted to wait until the last moment that I had time in order to go through all the filings before the hearing. Ideally, that would have been Saturday night. But I'm going to be out of town starting early morning tomorrow. So tonight was my last opportunity. So that's why I am doing this tonight. Not sure how long the stream will be. A lot might depend upon questions or how tired I get. I still have an awful lot to do. I've got to pre-record my radio show for Saturday since I will not be in studio. Got a lot of things. I got a lot. It's a lot. I probably won't sleep tonight. I generally don't sleep the nights before I travel because I've got so much to do. What else do I have to say here? My normal grift is along the bottom. And in these longer streams, of course, and I'm not sure how long it will be, super chats are always gratefully received. And yeah, all the rest of the grift is down there. Let's just get right into it, okay? Because this has the potential to be long. I'm not sure how deeply I want to get into this. Because I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't nervous as shit, okay? My nerves are shot. They are shot. I've already reconciled myself to the fact that it could be bad news, but that doesn't mean I don't want to throw up. Just to be honest. Okay. I want to show you where you can find these filings yourself without having to ask the JC for them, because I have now uploaded them. I just did that right before this show. So they're on Lpedia, but I want to pull them up, at least show you where you can find them. Okay, let me pull. Come on now. Why isn't it pulling up? My internet connection has been super bad today. Here we go. Okay, let me now share my screen. So here on Lpedia, let me close that so that's not distracting, and let me also get rid of this branding. There we go. So if you look up the Judicial Committee 2020 through 2022, You can see that I have added the first case, which is in re the suspension of LNC Secretary Karen Ann Harlows. So the hearing date, October 17th, and I will be uploading the recording here once we have a recording. Here are all of my filings, okay? There's the filings of the LNC, as far as I'm aware. Filings of Amicus Curiae, and other related documents and filings. And we're going to go through at least the most important of these. Some of these you don't need, or we'll just look at very briefly. But to get started, let's just get started where we should get started. I want to pull up, though, my camera, so I can have my face here on the screen as well. Just give me a second. Here we go. That's the wrong camera, though. That is my webcam. I don't want that. I want this one. Yeah, that's better. And let's make this a little smaller. And maybe right there. Okay, here we go. So the first thing we're going to pull up is my petition for appeal. Why not? And let's make this as big as I can. I think that's good. Okay. We're not going to go over this top part anything more than this first time, because this top part is what's called the style of the case, and that stays the same. You know, so it says, you know, the date, who's the petitioner, what's the deal, what's the subject matter, who are the interested parties, which is members of the LNC, Joe Bishop Henchman, relief requested, the jurisdiction of the JC to hear this case, and who will be appearing on my behalf. DL Cummings is acting as my advocate, so he will be the one speaking on my behalf. I will not be speaking on my own behalf unless there are direct questions to me by the JC. DL Cummings is, again, my advocate. So we're not going to read this word for word, but I'm going to touch upon the highlights. So here are the grounds for appeal. Number one, failure to provide adequate due process. This is something I have been harping on and harping on and harping on. It is absolutely disgusting that the Libertarian Party is arguing about due process. Okay. I've argued this before on why a trial is required. I will try to put up in the show cards here the show I already did on that. So we do not need to cover this all again, because I have covered that before, where I am, because I'm an officer, owed a trial. So we will go past this because I've done this, and I'll stick the link up there. But let's talk about the specific violations of my right to due process. I say the notice did not adequately, where it says inform her, it's me. I'll just say me wherever. I'm not going to talk about myself in the third person. That's just weird. Did not adequately inform me of the charges, and generally are bereft of charges and specifications. Charges and specifications are required. Even if a trial's not required, when you remove an officer, we need charges and specifications. Even the old opinion letter that the LNC is relying upon to deny me a trial still requires charges and specifications. So they didn't even comply with the opinion that they're relying on. As an example of this, the motion to remove me cited 2 videos, each over an hour long. No specification as to what's objectionable. What is it? Is it the music you don't like? What is it? I have no idea. So I had no ability to adequately prepare a defense. Ronner mandates 30 days notice. I only had 7 days notice. I wasn't allowed to call witnesses or cross-examine. Like, for instance, when Erin Adams lied about me twice, I should have been able to cross-examine her. I tried to, and Whitney cut me off. Okay? These are serious violations of a basic right of an individual member, are all sufficient on their own to render any removal null and void. Okay? Aside from the clear procedural errors and bylaws violations, it's a question of fundamental fairness to an accused individual to be told specifically what he or she has allegedly done and to permit the accused to test the veracity of the claims by questioning the accusers. I would think we would all, just as frickin' Americans, would agree with that. Okay. Second ground for appeal. Failure to provide evidence of action that rises to the level of a removable offense. So, the evidence presented was attached and referenced in the motion included these following categories. And I'm gonna name these because when I name them out loud, you realize how silly this is. This is my crimes. This is the list of my crimes, just so you know. These are the list of crimes for which I should be paraded naked through the streets with a SEPTA behind me and a bell saying shame, shame, okay? All the way up to the red keep. Here we go. 1, evidence was presented that I was experiencing a great deal of stress. Evidence was presented that I was complaining about some people were bullying me, inclusive of telling Susan Hogarth to stay out of my personal business because she kept getting into my personal business. Evidence was presented that I used curse words outside of meetings. So what? Evidence was presented that I had a non-official YouTube channel, which you guys are at right here, disclosed since the moment of creation. See Exhibit E for conflict of interest disclosure. Evidence was presented that I clearly distinguish my personal social media channels. Evidence was presented that I was asking about caucus presence in states that I was going to campaign at. Like, how is that a crime? That's just campaigning. Evidence was presented that I expressed strong disagreement with the perceived silence of the LNC on issues surrounding COVID. Yep, I certainly did. That's a feature, not a bug. Evidence was expressing my position that I was being targeted by certain LNC members for whistleblowing activities for my investigation and opinions about New Hampshire. That is also indisputably true. Here's one that's really good. I mean, I am such a criminal for this next one. Evidence was presented of religious posts by me where I was requesting people to pray for me. How dare I? Evidence was presented that I was daring to talk to attorneys about my rights. How dare I? Evidence was presenting that I asked members, you won't believe this, this is just such a horrible crime, to politely write the LNC. Clutch your pearls. How dare I ask members to politely write the LNC? And I did use the word politely. Evidence was presented that I told the LNC that I was assaulted at the 2016 convention. How dare I report an assault? Think of how chilling this accusation is, that this was in my list of crimes to anyone in the future who might want to report an assault. Evidence was presented about that I complained about double standards. How dare I complain? We'll remove you for complaining. And you know, I'm supposed to be allowed to complain per our policy manual. Evidence was presented that I dared to submit a general question to be asked to chair candidates in a thread that was asking LNC members to submit questions for chair candidates. I couldn't make this up. So next, there was a failure to connect provided body of evidence to claimed results or show how claimed results were beyond ordinary for controversial figures, such as any evidence of actual party members, staff, LNC members, or donors leaving or otherwise withdrawing or limiting support because of me. And if that were the case, any evidence that what happened above was above what is typical for any other notable figures. 3, any evidence that emails sent to the LNC by the public request that I made for members to politely write were substantially more threatening or derogatory than those involving other highly charged events. None of these things are sufficient to remove an officer who was elected by the delegates at convention from office. There's a dearth of evidence relating to the petition, my conduct within meetings or my conduct as secretary, and none that my conduct differs from the conduct expected by the delegates who elected me on an explicit platform of taking concerns directly to the members and exposing corruption. Okay, I've made the claim that this evidence was merely a perfunctory excuse to remove me. Because multiple members of the LNC have been trying to remove me since the day I was elected, I provided evidence to that fact. There was a failure to provide time for me to provide exculpatory evidence to Ms. Ebke's claims. For instance, Ms. Ebke claimed that my actions have resulted in the loss of established LP members, LNC officers, LP members, and longtime donors. There's only been one officer, Joe Bishop Henchman, to depart from the party. Evidence has been reported to the Libertarian National Party of actions that implicated him in unethical activities, and my involvement in exposing these activities, which led to his resignation, were well within my fiduciary responsibilities. The inclusion of this charge is blatant and express whistleblower retaliation. Another claim was made that my actions resulted in diminished functionality of the committee. But there's counter evidence that at least one donor said that combativeness is necessary and helpful in the party. Delegates were aware of and held expectations of me to be assertive, because that's what I ran on. And it says, the evidence that's been presented is so amorphous and unspecified that there cannot be a meaningful evaluation by the Judicial Committee. My next charge, failure to substantiate the allegation that I violated the NAP pledge. Says no evidence was given of any activities that involved physical force or fraud or inciting violent rebellion against the government. Rather, claims were made that opinions that upset people are violations of the pledge. Failure to substantiate allegations that I violated the social media policy or the conflict of interest policies. I didn't violate either, and I go through how I did not. Okay, so that's my petition, and I have a bunch of exhibits and evidence. So now let's look at their reply, which we looked at briefly before, where I showed where they lied about me. But let's look at it more substantially now. Response to the petition. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. That's all filler at the beginning. Here they talk about how they're allowed to do this, and that they don't have to give me a trial. But they don't ever show how they were prohibited from giving me a trial. I already did this in another video. Again, we're not going to do this. But it says precedent supports their interpretation. The precedent they cite means they need to give charges and specifications, which they did not do. It says, petitioner raises a number of speculative claims about the motives for her suspension. I provided proof for everything I said. It says the causes are amply sufficient. No, they're not. Plaintiffs, my conduct has had severe detrimental effect on the ability of the LNC to function as a collegial body because I held them accountable to their fiduciary duties and they didn't like it. Well, you want to know what? When you have an incompetent LNC, the last thing they should be is collegial. They should be kicking each other's ass to actually become competent and fight the COVID regime. And material or damage the interests of the party. No, dear hearts, you guys completely trashed the reputation of our party by not responding to COVID. Further, the charges are severable. No, they're not. They made them all in one motion. They could have moved to divide to have had multiple motions that then would have been severable. Because they voted on them as a block, the defeat of any one of them defeats all of them. The suspension of an officer is a grave choice, then why didn't you treat it gravely by actually producing evidence connected to actual allegations? And that's it. That's all their response. So it says, basically they just said, we wouldn't like it if you reinstate her because the committee has deemed me unacceptable. Well, if I get reinstated and you don't like it, you could always resign and we can appoint people who know how to deal with people rather than people who, when they don't get along with somebody or don't like them, wants to remove them, because that is authoritarian bullshit. And they go on about how 2/3 of the LNC wanted to remove me. No, they didn't. You had to rely on 2 alternates. To me, it's very clear that the bylaws intended 2/3 of the actual LNC. Alternates are not part of the LNC. They are not LNC members. They are spares when the LNC member is actually not present. They did not have 2/3 of the full LNC. They had 9 LNC members and 2 alternates. When you got to do shady business to win, I hope you sleep well at night. Okay, Ken Molman, God bless him, filed an amicus brief on my behalf, which is pretty powerful when the vice chair is supporting me. And he gets into why he cast an abstention. So those of you who are curious about that, I would really encourage you to read this. So he talks about due process. We've already went through that. So I'm going to get past that. But he goes to for cause. And he does a nice study on what for cause means. And he goes through, for cause in other elected officials and other private organizations and so on and so forth. So, and he says, so what's for cause when no rules have been codified? And he talks about what it is in the U.S. House. Like, he did a lot of really nice research. And, let's talk about things like malfeasance, like bribery and treason, not because you hurt somebody's feelings. So it says, in a private setting, terminating a member of a board for cause is most commonly because of that member's failing to live up to the terms of a contract. We have no such contract that says I can't do X or Y. So it says, based on the body of evidence, it appears that the primary concern was the language used by the secretary in public settings, though importantly, not during a meeting. There was not any harm proven as part of the Bill of Particulars. The concern brought forth to this committee is that an overly broad definition of cause will lead to future removals on shaky ground. As we are all unfortunately aware, there are caucuses and other political and personality-based divides within the party. Is cause truly to mean that a 2/3 majority on the LNC just disagrees with 1/3 of the LNC and therefore creates ground for removal because the supermajority cannot work with a member who belongs to another faction? Cause should be clearly defined and codified. It's not. And without that, there's a real potential for future abuse. Those items that go against our principles, the NAP, should certainly be considered cause, but personality conflicts, campaign rhetoric, and genuine misunderstanding should not be. Lacking anything substantive in writing to provide a clear path, it is up to the Judicial Committee to decide what is proper cause, knowing that such decision will create precedents for future suspensions from the LNC. He really nailed it there. And he gives a closing summary. And he says, it's my hope that the Judicial Committee sees past the current personalities and views their decision through the lens that one day they themselves may find themselves in the ultra minority and the protections they would like to have for themselves. And he gives some appendices. Very nice amicus. He didn't tell me he was doing this. It was a complete surprise to me when he filed this. Mike Seebeck also filed an amicus. And he, again, is dealing with procedural flaws in due process. So what I really liked what he said here is on the perversion of the non-aggression principle. To me, this is one of the most important things in this case that cannot be allowed to stand. So let's make this a little bigger. So it says here, I want to go here. Ms. Harlos has never threatened force against the LNC or any of its members. In fact, she is on record multiple times in multiple places, including on the LNC business list, explicitly denying any threats to sue the party or engage in any aggression. She's well known to be an avowed pacifist. But the real problem with this accusation is not with Ms. Harlos or her words. Rather, the real problem with the accusation is that it attempts to fundamentally change the meaning of the NAP into something that was never contemplated nor seriously considered at the party's founding or until now. If speech is considered aggression, then the consequences of such a precedent are far-reaching and serve not only to undermine the Libertarian Party, but the entire Libertarian movement. So, I think that's quite important. So, it says, the complainants propose that speech critical of them and their actions is to be silenced, and its makers removed because the majority doesn't approve of it, and justify that action by claiming it's a NAP violation. The majority in charge would subjectively determine what is acceptable speech and what is not based on their own biases and how it affects them politically and emotionally. Purges and infighting, as bad as they are now, would get far worse. And that is undeniably true. Okay, that's Mike Seebeck's Amicus. Before we get into some of my other filings, let's look at some of these other related documents and filings. Here's a letter from Justin O'Donnell, and we're going to read this. Dr. Ruhr, I'm sending this email to you in the hopes that you and other members of the Judiciary Committee may find its information valuable in considering the appeal of Secretary Harlow's suspension from the LNC. I believe this motion has been in the planning stages since long before any of the attempts were made by members of the LNC to remove Ms. Harlow, and I believe their motivations negatively color the righteousness of their actions. Mr. Longstreth and other members of the board have publicly claimed that the motion was a recent development and based purely on the conduct of Ms. Harlow. However, this is simply untrue. I had served as the Region 8 representative to the LNC for the previous 2 terms, and chose not to seek re-election due to what I perceived as a toxic work environment. Really, it wasn't just this term, Justin? Because that's what, like John Phillips and Aaron Adams have said. And petty interpersonal power struggles, hindering the ability of the LNC to conduct the business of the party. In hindsight, I do recognize my own fault for some of these actions, as I had become so frustrated with the disagreement of the board that I had begun working with Joe Bishop Henchman and Richard Longstreth on a plan to replace members of the board as early as the fall of 2019. Don't let Richard lie to you and say this was new. In hindsight, I regret my participation in these plans, but history cannot be changed. But at every stage of our planning in 2019, Richard Longstreth was insistent that he would replace CAH as secretary and do a better job than her. Heh, right. Try it, Richard. He and Mr. Bishop Henchman were the ringleaders of a group that met regularly to discuss options on how to remove ideological opposition from the LNC in the event that convention elections did not go their way. Really radical there, Richard. Present in the last of these meetings held in Orlando, following the fall 2019 LNC meeting, aside from myself, were also then LNC members Elizabeth Van Horn, Aaron Adams, Paige Sexton, who's David Sexton's wife, and non-LNC members Andy Craig and Ethan Bishop Henchman. We also approached Ms. Bilyeu about running for vice chair as part of a slate and informed her of our plans. While this testimony may not be conclusively damning to any individual, I believe that it should highlight the hypocrisy and dishonesty of some involved in the proceedings and lend credence to the fact that this was a corrupt backroom proceeding, which was in the planning stages for years before carrying out on whimsical charges. And then he attaches a copy of a Facebook post that we went over in a different stream. All right? I think this letter is pretty damning. Then here's a letter from the LP of New Hampshire in support of me. And I like this second paragraph. Some might say that her principles sometimes supersede her decorum, and maybe sometimes this is the case. We would rather have a truly principled member in the fight for freedom than a half-hearted, well-behaved libertarian myrmidon, I think is how you pronounce that. Our current situation in our country actually requires the fortitude that she possesses. So that was a very nice letter. And lastly, I didn't put up yet the Colorado resolution, which I just ran out of time before the stream. But here's a resolution of the Libertarian Party of Minnesota. So it said, whereas the Libertarian National Committee expressed nearly zero opposition to tyrannical lockdown measures during 2020, despite the vocal protestation of Secretary Harlow. Whereas the Libertarian National Committee neglected speedy investigation of former chair, JBH, corruption and malfeasance, leading to the inability to recover key evidence in the New Hampshire investigation, despite the urging of Secretary Harlow. Whereas the process used for the removal of Secretary Harlow had minimal notice, lacked basic due process, a very important libertarian principle. Furthermore, during the process of removal at the September 2021 LNC meetings, members aligned with Secretary Harlos were deliberately excluded from the ability to vote. Be it resolved that the Libertarian Party of Minnesota Executive Committee hereby expresses no confidence in the Libertarian National Committee. They were just so desperate to remove me that they sold their principles for a mess of pottage. Okay, now let's look at some of the rest of my filings. I don't think we need to look at like my witness and exhibit list. Let's do my reply to the LNC's response. I go over due process again. I'm not going to do that here. I did that in another stream. But they make some false statements, which I went over in another stream. Members at large are not equivalent to officers, which they claimed. They try to say I was inconsistent with how I voted for in the Ovenbora suspension, as if that has anything at all to do now. I could be the biggest hypocrite in the world and still be right in this. But the two situations are very distinguishable. Read this if you'd like. I don't want to. That's such a non-issue to me. Talked about that the charges are severable. They are not. Okay, let me see what else I say here. It's a lot of repeating, just answering them. Right here, this is a new one. The LNC relied upon a temporary condition in order to obtain the vote threshold required, resulting in a situation in which if the vote were redone with all members present, the result would be different, even though no member has changed their position. That should be fatal, and that should make every member who believes that the will of the convention delegates should be upheld, absent extraordinary circumstances, be outraged, because they didn't even have the 2/3 of the entire LNC that they claimed they had. They summarily dismiss evidence of bad faith. Okay, well, I would if I were them too, I guess. They outright misrepresented their efforts at de-escalation because they didn't do any attempts at de-escalation. And then, prayers for relief. But one other thing here that we're going to go over. Oh, and those of you who wrote in support of me, just so you know, I made good use of your emails. If you thought that they never would see the light of day again, I decided that the Judicial Committee should see the member support I have. So here's 1,313 pages of member support. So here's all those emails, and I redacted your personal information. I filed a non-redacted copy with the Judicial Committee under seal. So here's all those emails you sent. So you did help me. But let's go here to the other thing where I supplemented what Ken filed, which is my brief on for cause, an examination of the evidence in relation to same. So I talk about how Robert's Rules of Order defines cause. And I talked about how they slandered me in their reply. Talk about the difference between misconduct and malfeasance. But now I get into the party culture, and I want to read this out loud. Throughout party history, there have been public clashes between members of the LNC, including dueling blog posts on the official site and disagreements and blog comments at various political outlets. Before that, disagreements happened over snail mail and email, some of which were published through independent news outlets. In short, sharp disagreement, including harsh words from LNC members to other LNC members, have never been unusual for the party culture. In fact, many such occurrences happened last term between the petitioner, which is me, along with the majority of signers to the LNC's response against former Chair Sarwark, including similar allegations of corruption. At no point was there any attempt to remove any of those making such allegations, nor was it even remotely suggested, although the tone and frequency were similar, as were the outlets, being social media and YouTube. At that time, Chair Sarwark found some members of the LNC so impossible to work with that he publicly denounced them as the Notorious Nine. And those designated took it as a badge of honor. They had t-shirts made and wore them to the 2020 convention. It is in this backdrop of open and sharp criticism of other LNC members for wrongdoing that I gave my I will never hesitate to expose backroom shady dealing nomination speech, which earned my election by a majority on the first round of voting. Mr. Molman spoke similarly during the vice chair debate. And by the way, none of these at-larges, like Richard Longstreth, Laura Epke, and Valerie Sarwark, that voted to remove me, they didn't even get 40% on the first round. They were not elected by the majority of delegates like I was. Okay, then it talks about the Arvin Vohra thing, not even getting into that. And then I provide some relevant laws on whistleblowers, some general law on what for cause means, including Black's Law Dictionary and employment law. And here's where it gets really interesting. And I really encourage you guys to pull this up and read. Examination of evidence. So I said, as detailed in my prior filings, the suspension made absolutely no attempt to connect any specific and individual pieces of evidence to any of the various alleged harms, which include causing the resignation of the party chair, loss of LP staff, loss of established LP members, loss of longtime donors, liability to public image, and undermining ethics and reputation of LNC as an all-volunteer body. It made only the broadest attempts to catalog whole swaths of evidence to only some of the charges, such as violation of various policy manual things, which don't apply, and the Nat Pledge. I said, however, despite these fatal flaws, I will examine and summarize each piece of evidence, something they didn't do. I did more for their evidence than they did, to show that they do not, neither individually nor in the cumulative, meet any of the alleged charges nor rise to any level of cause to overturn the will of the delegates in convention. Before this examination, it's necessary to highlight certain pieces of LNC testimony, which may be as attempts to do what the original Bill of Particulars did not. Connect actions of the petitioner to accusations, but instead demonstrate continued failure to do so, compounded by outright misrepresentations and denials of allegations and contradiction to charges and conviction on actions that are part of the charges to begin with. So in their argument for why they're voting to remove me, they disagreed with Epke's motion. Then they should have voted no. This just shows you how corrupt and unprincipled they are. So this one's particularly damning. And I just do not know how she's... it wasn't 131 emails, Ryan. It was 1,030 emails. And some people might say, well, then how many emails were sent in support of removing you? Less than 20 compared to my 1,030 in support of me. Ms. Epke confirmed in presenting the motion that the evidence presented is to be considered as support of the allegations made, and that such action was never to be taken lightly. However, included in the evidence is a video in which petitioner performed an RCB demo using the chair's race ballots, which is alleged in the Bill of Particulars to be connected to a claim that I was abusive and offensive. However, Ms. Epke personally wrote to me praising that video, and I'll show you the email. It cannot be both damning and praiseworthy. This supports my claim that the evidence was merely an exercise in throwing things at the wall and seeing what stuck. This is not an honest way to try to remove an officer and speaks very poorly of Ms. Epke's diligence in personally reviewing all of the evidence before taking such a serious action. Yeah, she listed a video that she wrote me and said how wonderful the video was as an awful video. Which is it, Laura? Which is it, Senator? Richard Longstreth. Mr. Longstreth claimed that I encouraged people to write and abuse him. However, the only specific piece of evidence given that obviously dealt with any request of mine to write did not deal with him specifically, and I asked members to be polite. He alleges that two members, can you imagine that? 2 out of how many in this party? I'm surprised 2 members don't come forward every day complaining about somebody. We are libertarians, after all. Have come forward with complaints. There's one email in the evidence folder that has absolutely nothing to do with the National Party, but is an internal Colorado matter that is completely inappropriate for Mr. Longstreth to drag into a national proceeding. Further involved documented threats against me to beat me into a bloody pulp and within an inch of my life. requiring a police report to be filed with the Weld County Police Department so that a restraining order could be obtained. It is completely unethical for Mr. Longstreth to weaponize such an email. Mr. Longstreth himself ended up in a conflict with a member and implied the member was a liar, which was proven incorrect with documents. And that's the Justin O'Donnell email. Similar, earlier this year, a member complained about abuse by Mr. Phillips, something which at least some of the members of LNC have been made aware of, yet they've said nothing. Longstreth further claims that there's a significant portion of the party that supports my removal. If there is, they did not write. I received over 1,000 emails supporting the defeat of any removal and approximately 20 emails that supported removal, a 50-to-1 ratio in my support. Lastly, Longstreth falsely claimed that I never apologize, which is also false. In fact, in that very meeting, there was an example made of me apologizing to Aaron Adams and saying that I didn't think I was always right. Aaron Adams. Ms. Adams in the Bill of Particulars makes the claim that I accused LNC members of attempting to compel me to commit suicide. She even told me on Wednesday evening prior to the LNC meeting that she confirmed that that is what I said by reviewing the video the night before. However, this is absolutely false. What I actually said was I did not believe that is what they were trying to do. The exact opposite of what I'm being accused of. And I provide a clip to the JC. Aaron Adams further mischaracterizes an email exchange as benign in which Susan Hogarth attacked me over issues with draft minutes, which were completely off base and had zero constructive feedback, and went on to exaggerate my language, defending my work product with the worst possible interpretation. And I provide the email exchange so that people can see it for themselves. And yet she told me in private she didn't think that email exchange was benign and that Susan Hogarth was completely out of line. Yet the story changed during the meeting. I would further note that discussing this email at all was inappropriate because it was not included in my list of crimes and could have been if Aaron Adams thought it was that important. Lastly, if an accusation of trying to make someone commit suicide is a violation of the non-aggression principle and an outrageous accusation of a felony, then why was Aaron Adams silent when I presented proof that Richard Longstreth actually accused me of that? And I provide the example. Richard Longstreth asked me if I was trying to make him commit suicide. Why the double standard? Aaron Adams. John Phillips. Mr. Phillips claimed that I was guilty of accusing the former chair with zero proof, even though I turned out to be right. And this was a major factor in his yes vote. This makes no sense. If there was no incriminating evidence at all, what would have been the reason to seat an investigatory committee? The following were specific facts and evidence available to all. The initial letter posted by Gilletta Jarvis from the former chair as justification for her coup. The testimony by Ms. Jarvis to me that this letter was a transfer of affiliation. The refusal of the former chair to outright repudiate the use that Gilletta Jarvis made of that letter. The testimony of Gilletta Jarvis that contrary to the representations made by the former chair, this letter was procured by a third party. The written outburst by the former chair of a great conspiracy of racists in the party. The threat by the former chair to sue both me and Joshua Smith when I asked questions about this third party mentioned by Gilletta Jarvis. No evidence, huh? Mr. Phillips also claimed he had no issue with any of the profanity that I used because he's just as guilty. But in the Bill of Particulars, that is one of the accusations against me, upon which he voted to convict. He could have moved to strike that reference and did not. He concluded his first speech in a blatant act of indecorum and stormed out of the meeting without facing any repercussions. He actually said the blatant act of indecorum where he told everyone at the table, I don't like any of you, and then he flounced off. David Sexton. Mr. Sexton claimed that any one piece of evidence would be sufficient to convict. While that statement may be somewhat hyperbolic, the fact that so much of the evidence is benign or irrelevant leads one to believe that David Sexton didn't even review the evidence. Valerie Sarwark. Ms. Sarwark followed the pattern of introducing reasons for her vote that alleged items that were not even in the motion. Specifically, she alleged the loss of an elected official. I've never been accused of that yet. I can only guess who she means. But if my guess is correct, which I'm guessing she means Sasha Cohen. This official left because of the New Hampshire affiliate was not disaffiliated. So Ms. Sarwark would also be evidencing blatant whistleblower retaliation and blaming me for protecting that affiliate to the dissatisfaction of one elected official, Dustin Nana. Now, this isn't bad. This is saying good things about Dustin. Dustin very astutely characterized what he saw as going on. I was being used as a scapegoat for other LNC members' own failings and inability to deal with personality differences. If any member of the LNC felt they could not work with another member, that issue lies with that person's ability to deal with difficult people, not the allegedly difficult person. He noted during this whole time he's had no issue being productive or getting things done. He characterized this current action as personal, factional, and based on current or prior caucus affiliations. He also made the obvious argument that convention's only 8 months away and the delegates should make this decision. Now we move on to the actual evidence. There was a massive data dump that was never connected directly and specifically to any allegation with an explanation how it related. This made it impossible for me to effectively defend myself against any potential allegations of legitimate cause for removal, since it was an amorphous mass of a target, with the oral arguments of those supporting the motion making it clear that they didn't even have a clear handle on why exactly I was being removed and what evidence supported the cause requirement. It is further obvious that once a decision was made to try to remove me, a search was made simply using keywords used in posts by me in order to support the already decided conclusion, a classic case of a conclusion searching for evidence rather than having evidence that leads to a conclusion. This is very apparent if the dates of the posts are examined, as some of them are from nearly a year ago. Why were this not brought up as a problem back then? The Libertarian Party would never defend any prosecutor or civil plaintiff that tried to get a judgment or conviction in this matter. Particularly obvious examples of irrelevant and benign posts just lumped in together are highlighted in the chart at the end, and the Judicial Committee is asked to review those items in particular. A note on YouTube monetization. And while I'm here, grift away. Somebody, like while we're talking about YouTube monetization, send me a super chat to prove my point. It appears that many on the LNC are simply out of touch with this new media explosion. I edited this. I did title this section originally, Okay Boomer. Thousands of people count YouTube as their full-time job, and that is what I am working towards. The LNC is basically telling me you can't have this job, and that is beyond out of bounds. Many libertarians make income with liberty activism, and this action sets the precedent that this makes them ineligible to be LNC members. This is a decision only the delegates at convention can make, not the LNC. This is gross overreach and certainly not misconduct to be cause for removal. Further, if viewed in a jaundiced light, this very much can look like the LNC interfering in internal elections, particularly the upcoming chair and vice chair races. Two candidates that are known to be associated with the Mises Caucus are supported through liberty activism and patrons. To many, this looks like the LNC using me as an excuse to sabotage those campaigns. And that is what I think, by the way. Note, no timestamps were ever given on these videos, most of which are over an hour long. Since there were no timestamps, I had no opportunity to defend myself during the original motion. Thus, it's too late for the LNC to try to cure this deficiency at the appellate stage, though the JC is giving them, I believe, illegitimately the opportunity. And we'll go over my objection, which was overruled, but I think that is entirely wrong. So I encourage everyone to go through this chart I made where I went through every piece of evidence and explained it. Something they never did. And particularly these highlighted ones. So these are the names of them that are in their evidence folder. But like these are completely innocuous Facebook posts asking for support because I'm close to YouTube milestones. Okay, let's look at some of these other highlighted ones. It says, these are all posts in a caucus group that are part of my campaign for re-election. This is completely over the line for the LNC to be interfering in my internal office campaign, particularly with such innocuous posts that are just asking if I have supporters. It is honestly borderline stalkerish. Here's another one. I was alerting the... Okay, this one is rich. I think I'm going to pull up the... This was in, what, folder B? I think we're going to pull this up because I got to show you that you will not believe that this is evidence against me. Okay? This is so gross. Oh, my God. We're going to pull that up. And then here's the question I asked of chair candidates. And here's a LP time capsule video they found offensive. There's nothing offensive in it. So I said, in facing the sheer volume of the alleged evidence, it appears like there's a mountain of evidence against me. But once it's examined, it completely disintegrates. This was a trawling expedition by the LNC, and that is no way. And thank you, Stephen, for the super chat. Thank you so much. And thank you for saying you'll be at the proceedings. There's nothing to warrant the hysteria that surrounded me by the LNC, and nothing that warrants removal. The serious disciplinary step of removal must not allow it to be used for factional wars or personality conflicts, which is exactly what they are doing. And let's just go over some of the footnotes here. So this footnote is really interesting because it shows the hypocrisy of Aaron Adams. It says, in fact, on the Drunken Disorderly podcast, LNC members John Phillips and Aaron Adams were frequently crude and rude towards party members and other LNC members. Ms. Adams said that when she gets hate letters from party members that she masturbates to them. The show contains this disclaimer. Each individual member is accountable for their own statements and actions. D&D Media is not liable nor accountable for hurting your feelings or offending you. If you don't like what's being said, turn it off. Why am I not given that courtesy, Ms. Adams? Why? Such hypocrisy. Further, there's a merchandise store set up for Drunken Disorderly with the images of Aaron Adams, an LNC member, which is being used to monetize that project. And here's some examples of Drunken Disorderly posts openly accusing former Chair Sarwark of corruption. Further, some of the joke material on that show includes talking about murdering people. The Facebook page is downright abusive to those who support mandates, and according to Ms. Adams, abuse is always aggression and an app violation. To be clear, I am not offended or complaining. I'm pointing out the hypocrisy. I am, in fact, a fan of Drunken Disorderly. And then here are the Notorious 9, which are actually 10 people. I don't know what Nick's problem was, whether he was counting Aaron and Whitney as one person or he can't count. But the Notorious 9, who Nick said made the LNC impossible to work with, which is my crime, allegedly. Aaron Adams, Whitney Bilyeu, Sam Goldstein, me, Jeffrey Hewitt, Richard Longstreth, Alicia Matson, Stephen Nicola, John Phillips, and Joshua Smith. Okay. This is all. The statement of particulars mentions resignations of officers in the plural, but only one officer who resigned was the party chair. The party chair resigned in disgrace amongst proven allegations of corruption. If I caused him to resign, that is a feature and not a fault. And here's what's funny. This is just whatever. Here's another one. It says, this accusation is richly hypocritical because they're talking about the resignation of LP staff, allegedly. Since advocates of the suspension hard-sold non-committed votes with the threat that multiple staff members would resign if they did not get their way. This is an entirely unethical, which I do have an ethics complaint about, weaponizing of staff for which a complaint was filed. Now, over a month later, no investigation of that complaint has begun. I will continue to maintain that the very unclean hands of the sponsor should disqualify this motion, lest this behavior be encouraged in the future. Okay. And then I ask the JC to watch the hearing. I say the obvious bias of the chair is evident. One very notable example is the chair stepping out of her role as the presiding officer and openly contradicting me on an issue of an opinion, not objective fact. I give a clip. I give timestamps, you see, when I say something in a video. I don't just throw videos at the wall. I give clips where the chair, Ms. Bilyeu, was overly aggressive towards me, which is unbecoming of a chair. I said she consistently spoke additional times rather than just first and last in appeals in order to immediately contradict me, which is inappropriate for a presiding officer. I said she was obviously prejudiced and should have recused herself. In such a matter, it's probably good practice in the future for a non-LNC member to preside over proceedings involving such a serious internal discipline. And then I say, Mr. Longstreth forcefully asserts that he too was elected by the delegates So by voting to remove me, he also had their permission. This is flawed on many grounds. First, he didn't run on a platform of removing people and did not have such a reputation. Also, as often happens, none of the at-large representatives were elected by a majority of the delegates. Epke had 39, Sarwark 38, Longstreth 35%. In contrast, I was elected by a majority of the delegates on the first round of voting. This reveals a problem with the party's common habit of shortchanging internal elections at convention and having national committee elected with less than a majority vote. So you have people who are not even approved by a majority of the delegates who are voting to remove a popular officer. Okay? Now, there's a few other things I wanted to show you. I wanted to show you Laura Epke's email, and I think that's in the Notice of Filing Supplemental Exhibits. Okay, this is the Investigatory Committee of New Hampshire. That's long. You guys have seen that from the meeting. Okay. Ah. No, that's not it. That's a different one. Where is her email to me? Where did I put it? I must have put it in a different thing. I don't have it immediately handy, but I can get it for you. Let me see if it's in my Google Drive. No, that's not it. I can end up getting it for you. These are screenshots. JC emails, current filings. Huh. Exhibits, amended exhibit list. I'm not sure where that's at, but I'll be able to get that for you. Let me look at one more thing here. Let me go back here and look at that for-cause brief and see what exhibit number that was for Laura Epke. It's up here. Exhibit Y. Where is Exhibit Y? Appeal exhibits. I don't think I go to Exhibit Y here. No, that only goes to L because I added exhibits. Amended exhibit list. Appeal. Look at the Notice of Filing Supplemental. I'm sorry that I didn't have this immediately available. U V W X. I didn't file Y. I'm going to need to fix that. Y or Z? What happened to Y and Z? Did I file them somewhere else? Did I file them attached to my for-cause brief? I'm going to have to probably send in a supplement to the LNC. I'm glad I did this because it looks like I missed Y and Z. What was Z? Let me look at my exhibit list and see what Y and Z are. Y and my Facebook post dated August 5th. Okay, I'm going to need to file those. Those somehow got left out. All right, well, I'm glad I did that then, that I figured out, you know, with all those filings, I missed a couple things. So let me go back here. Oh, I wanted to go to that evidence folder because I wanted to show you that one thing that is so ridiculous. So let me go back here. And we said it was in folder B, right? Appendix B. This is her evidence. It's this one. Okay. Check out this crime. Look at what a horrible person I am. This is from the internal list. This is my crime. Harassment I just received. Just an FYI, I just got a phone call saying someone keyed their car and left my name and number on the windshield. The caller came up political call from Austin, Texas. It was a man who was very angry. Whenever we have anybody who looks like they're targeting LNC members, like with stuff like this, we're supposed to report it. That's what I did. I reported it. Ha! Guess what I just figured out? Look. I had guessed who did this data dump of information to try to convict me, and I had guessed it was Matthew Buffman. Look, this means it was printed from his email. See his name right up there? I was right. Matthew Buffman's the one who did this data dump. It wasn't even Laura Epke. She just signed her name to it without even looking at it. Look at that. The former cop. My guess, I'm so good. That was my guess that he did it. And now I have proof. And then I said, I reverse searched the phone number. It's from the Republican Party of Texas. And then I give a screenshot. And I said, I'm calling tomorrow to see if someone really was keyed. And if so, I'll add that to the police report and try to find out if any local businesses had cameras. That's it. This is in my list of where I was being offensive. Would anyone here care to explain? Mr. Buffman, will you care to explain? This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. Anyone who thinks that this case against me had any feet, just look at this. I dare anyone to try to say how this is a removable email. I'm reporting an incident that happened to me in case it happened to any other LNC members. We are duty bound to report these things. Shame on you, Matthew Buffman. You are disgusting. You can't have been a very good... You're currently a private investigator. If this is the quality of your work, I'll just let it speak for itself. Gross. So this is the type of shit this LNC is removing your duly elected officer for. Do you feel good about this LNC? Do you? See how gross this is? That one email right there should tell you everything that you need. That they didn't take this seriously or cautiously. They just didn't like me and they wanted me gone. And they were willing to shit all over you to do it. You delegates. This LNC thinks they rule over you. They're better than you. And they have the right to overturn your choice based on nothing. That's why I say this is the worst LNC in the history of the party. And the fact that the chair let them get away with this, Whitney, you've got a lot to answer for. You very easily could have ruled it out of order. Just look through that evidence and you would have been like, this is a harassment campaign against this woman. This is a clown car. That's why I sent them the notice of suspension written in Comic Sans font. And I regret not putting the clip art on it. That's all the respect it deserves. None. And Matthew Buffman, you're gross. How dare you? I'll tell you one thing, dude. You couldn't get elected on the first round by a majority of delegates. Sucks to be you. I can. And I'll do it again in Reno. This is a sad, pathetic day for this party. Y'all ought to be appalled. And hey, I don't tell people to write the JC because it's not a political body. Do not do it. But I'm not telling you not to write the LNC to tell them what pieces of shit this evidence is. Not the members. Be polite to them. You can be rude about the evidence because the evidence sucks, but never be abusive when you write the LNC. Because they'll just use it against you for one thing. And B, I don't believe in writing people abusive emails. It's so easy to do that when you're behind a keyboard. It's very easy to remove your secretary, too, when you're compiling little things of evidence behind a keyboard. But you can be honest about what you think about their efforts. Like, you can criticize their efforts. Do not criticize their person. Sometimes I need to remember that myself. But it's one thing if I do it because they know me and they can see me, rather than you who they don't necessarily know and they think I sent you as my flying monkeys or something like that. But I'm proud of myself. I was good. I thought it was Matthew Buffman, and now I have the proof. Dude, you forgot. You forgot that it puts your name up at the top of the printouts when you print out an email out of Google Mail. I'm going to hang around a few more minutes. I would love to interact with comments from y'all. Whew, I am just super distressed. Do you know how hard I worked to get this position? And scum tactics go to remove me. And Aaron Adams and John Philip, they all think they're justified. That's what I have to say to them. That's what I have to say to them. How dare you? Gross. And I think what underlies a lot of it is jealousy. I'm a popular secretary. And you would never have the love of the people that I have. I don't have the love of the bureaucrats, and I don't want it. I have the love of the common people, and that's what I want. Because they know I stand up for them, and I took a bullet for them. None of you guys would lose your position for the common people. I did. Laura Epke certainly never would. She lives for titles. Cowboy asks, what's percentage on my chances? I have no idea. By the time it gets to the JC, the burden of proof is on me. The presumption is in favor of the LNC. So it is a higher burden of proof. If there were justice in this world, I would win easily. The JC actually has a very politically expedient solution to this, since the LNC did not provide charges and specifications. They could just dismiss it without prejudice and punt it back to the LNC, and then the LNC could decide whether they want to actually try me the right way, which I don't think they'll do, but maybe. They haven't proven to be very politically smart, so I would almost say, that would be totally politically suicidal to retry me, but they are so deranged that maybe they would do it. They'd be signing even more of their own political, I don't want to say death warrant because that sounds so violent, and I'm not like that, but I mean, they know they're not getting reelected in Reno as it is. So maybe they would retry me, but let them do it the right way. And if I'm not reinstated, what's my plans, Amanda? I'm campaigning my ass off to get reinstated at Reno, because I trust the delegates to make things right. So, yeah. Oh, good, Cowboy, because I asked for that list. So I'm glad she did that. Let's go look. They should be doing that regularly. But I also asked with justification of why they were discussed. We're going to go over this list then. Nope, this is bullshit. So let's go over this. One of these might be legitimate. So let's look at this. Okay. CRM migration. Okay. At least she honestly says she don't know why this was confidential, and I don't really care about that. Delaware issue. It says a matter that has definite legal and ballot access ramifications. Just because something has a ballot access ramification does not make it justified under the bylaws to be confidential. Not at all. It's not pending or potential litigation. That pending or potential litigation has to do with pending or potential litigation of the national party, and not of pending or potential litigation of the Delaware party. Two totally different things. There's no justification for those to be, we're going to go over this probably in another show. Communication between JC and LNC on suspension, that is not pending or potential litigation. You guys accused me of in public. I have already said 1,000,000 times, I would never sue the LNC. But if your defense requires you to say things that you think might get you sued, perhaps you shouldn't have suspended me. I will give her that the Delaware one might be arguable. I don't think it falls under confidentiality, but that one I could see a reasonable person. The ones about me, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was accused publicly. The JC's communications, by the way, are public. I could ask for every single email. It's not private. So I will be sending a challenge to that. It was actually the Libertarian Party of Colorado that asked for this list. So I need to speak with the board of the LPCO and see if they agree with my analysis. And we will, and if they do, we will be challenging the ones about me, because there is no reason for that to be a confidential. None. Plus, I asked for an accounting from September 5th through the present. Now, perhaps they didn't use the secret list between September 5th and October 5th. I know that's not true, though. I know that's not true. They had been using it about my suspension ever since I filed my appeal, which was September 10th. So she didn't even give a complete list. But I am going out of town, and I'm concentrating on my appeal. So I don't know if I'll have a chance to challenge any of this. Her response is not complete. But at least it's better than nothing. I will give her credit for a partial response. That technical info, I could see how perhaps that could cause exploitation. So I could see why that was confidential, actually. That October 6th one. I can see the argument for confidentiality on that one. The Delaware one, I don't believe so. Ballot access ramifications aren't a reason in and of itself, because the ballot access ramifications are public already. But definitely not the ones about myself. But I thank her for providing that, and thank you guys for letting me know. They're so shady. That whole LNC is so shady. Well, all right, everyone. I guess I'll get going now. I got a lot to do. And I'll see you virtually on Sunday at my hearing. But I think you see what a shitty case they had. And they feel good about it. Makes Will McVeigh look like a saint in what he did for Delaware. All right, later. Hope you have a good night.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business.